Good day, good people, and welcome to Contemplative Inner Being on the Mighty Network. Whether you are here for the live session or you're watching the recording, we appreciate you being here. If you will, let me know in the chat section that the audio and video is working well on your end. Thank you very much. And I believe today is Stephen F's first time to be with us live, so if we can send him a welcome in the chat from each of you, that would be great. Stephen, thank you for being here. Our order of things this evening is we will go into contemplative practice together for a few minutes. I'll share a reflection, contemplative practice again, and then another period of reflection followed by the third time to get into contemplative silence. If at any time during the reflection something comes to your heart that you would like to share in the chat, be it a comment, a question, maybe you want to echo or just note take by using the chat. We always like to see what notes you're interested in taking. Just feel free to put that in the chat. We do use the reflection as a time to have a bit of a conversation together. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I will remind you that each day at around 11:15 Central Time, you'll see a post in the Mighty Network that goes along with tonight's theme of resilience and growth. That way you have a way to stay fresh each week and kind of visit our topic. So again, welcome everyone. Let us enter into contemplative practice together as we are committed. Take a gentle deep breath. Find your center. Let go of the busyness of the day. Let go of the planning for tomorrow. Just be here now. And let us share a few minutes of silence together. Again, take a gentle deep breath and exhale slowly and open your eyes if you had them closed. As I was saying earlier, each of these sessions is recorded, and you can find those later on the Mighty Network under the section titled Recordings. And you'll also find them on YouTube under our playlist titled Radical Resilience, the title for this year's theme. You know, friends, for many of us, growth has been imagined as a path toward independence, a kind of ascending staircase where each step is a mark of self-reliance. But perhaps the spiritual path is more like returning to the womb of the earth, into the moist soil of humility where we learn again and again that we are held. Years ago, Father Richard Rohr stood before a community formed by hope and justice and named something that we often overlook, that we can get stuck in ourselves. You know, in a world steeped in therapy culture and the gospel of self-actualization, he gently warned that healing the psyche is not the same as awakening the soul. And we live in a time where feelings are crowded or are crowned as truth, where my story often eclipses the collective memory, and where inner work is praised as its own end. But the mystics whisper a different tale. The ego can become a chapel that traps rather than frees. And this isn't a dismissal of psychology, far from it. It is simply a reminder that insight is not union, that comfort is not surrender. Psyche meeting psyche can bring understanding, but spirit meeting spirit brings transformation. And the ancient traditions call us beyond this mirror of self-reflection into a sacred forgetting, a holy yielding. You know, we are not here to worship our wounds. We are here to let them become thresholds. And real spiritual practice, quiet, disruptive, unglamorous, pulls us beyond the need for explanation. In this space, grace becomes breath, not doctrine. Presence becomes enough. Nothing needs to be achieved, only received. The self is no longer a project to fix or a treasure to protect. The self becomes permeable like a mist burning off in morning light. That is what it means to be free. That is what it means to belong, not to our smallness, but to the mystery that gave us life and never stops calling us home. Now, Richard Rohr, he offers his own basic overview of the stages of spiritual development, which also account for our developmentally appropriate psychological needs. There are many different theories of spiritual development, and they are typically described in stages, and Richard Rohr has brought about his. There are 9 stages, and I'm just going to go over those briefly, and then maybe sometime later in the year we'll return to those in depth. Number 1, my body and self-image are who I am. That means that we focus on our own security, safety, and defense needs. This is our very early stage, young childhood. 2, my external behavior is who I am. We need to look good from the outside and to hide any contrary evidence from others and eventually from ourselves. This seems to go on for quite a long time. The ego shadow begins to emerge at this time. Then number 3, my thoughts and feelings are who I am. That's where we begin to take pride in our better thoughts and feelings and learn to control them, so much so that we don't even see their self-serving nature. For nearly all of us, a major defeat, shock, or humiliation has to be suffered and passed through to go beyond this stage. And many people, mature adults, are still at this stage. Number 4 is my deeper intuitions and felt knowledge in my body are who I am. This is such a breakthrough and so helpful that many of us are content to stay here. But really to remain at this level may lead to inner work or body work as a substitute for any real encounter with or sacrifice for the other. And we see this at the beginning of our earlier enlightenment when we seem to begin deconstructing our old religious thoughts and we think that we're enlightened, and so we stay there. Number 5, my shadow self is who I am. This is what's called the dark night of senses. This is the first dark night of senses, when our weakness overwhelms us and we finally face ourselves in our unvarnished and uncivilized state. But without guidance, grace, and prayer, most of us go running back to our previous identities. So to work with this stage 5, you really need a good spiritual director or a really good friend. Number 6. Yes, number 6. I am empty and powerless. Some call this sitting in God's waiting room, but it is more often known as the dark night of the soul. And at this point, almost any attempt to save ourselves by any superior behavior, superior morality, or prayer technique is going to fail us. And all we can do is to ask, wait, and trust. It's at this stage that God is about to become real, and the false or separate self is dying in a major way. Number 7. I am much more than who I thought I was. We experience the permanent waning of the false self and the ascent of the true self as the center of our being. It feels like an absence or void, even if it's a wonderful void. John of the Cross calls this luminous darkness. This is where we grow not by knowing or understanding, but only by loving and trusting. You might get a sense now how important the earlier stages are, right? You have to go through each one. There's no non-flight stop from the first to the last. We all go through these. And then number 8 is the Father and I are one, drawing on that statement from John 10:30. And at this stage, there is only God. There is nothing we need to protect, promote, or prove to anyone, especially ourselves. And here, our false self no longer guides the ship. We have learned to let grace and mystery guide us, still without full, if any, comprehension. And I will say that once you get to about stage 6, you can begin to experience 7 and 8, and then you feel like you're there, and then you move back. And that's much of how we do in stage development. We start getting little tiny pieces, and we move back. It's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and that's how we move through the stages. And the 9th and final stage is I am who I am. I'm just me, warts and all. We are now at this stage fully detached from our own self-image and living in God's image of us, which includes and loves both the good and the bad. And we experience true serenity and freedom. And this is the peace the world cannot give, according to John 14:27. And this is where we fully rest in God. And admittedly, many of us will not get there until about our last breath. Let me see if I can put those 9 in the chat so that you'll have them. Of course, let's see. Give me 1 second and I'll try to get those 9 in there. So one more time, my body and self-image are who I am. My external behavior is who I am. My thoughts and feelings are who I am. And then my deeper intuitions and felt knowledge in my body are who I am. My shadow self is who I am. Then we recognize I am empty and powerless. I am much more than I thought I was. The Father and I are one, and I am who I am. So friends, like smoke rising from smoldering embers, the idea of resilience carries with it both memory and fire. To be resilient, we're told, is to bounce back. But what if we never return to what we were? What if we are not rubber but clay, where we are shaped by each sorrow, we're dented by grief, and we're made beautiful in our distortion? And this is the kind of resilience. It doesn't erase the past, but it keeps its fingerprints. It says, yes, I am marked. And it listens to James Baldwin's voice in the dark. They marked me forever, he says. And rather than mourn the marking, it builds a life around it. This is not cheap endurance. It is the spiritual art of bearing what has burned us and walking anyway. Not because we are strong, but because something in us refuses to surrender our shape to despair. You see, we carry the scent of smoke with dignity. Now, one of my teachers, psychotherapist and contemplative James Finley, speaks of mercy the way one speaks of a long-lost friend, where it's intimate, tender, and waiting. And he reminds us that our jagged parts are not obstacles but entry points. That our shame-covered selves are not problems to be solved. Our shame-covered selves are altars upon which divine love is poured. It's like that Japanese art, kintsugi, right, where the cracks are filled with gold. And we spiral through healing, not in those straight lines, but in slow returns. And each return becomes an invitation to treat ourselves more kindly. And slowly through that holy repetition, the hardened parts begin to soften, the cracks begin to widen, and the light gets in. So to be resilient in this spiritual sense is not to withstand, it is to let go. It is to be reshaped, memory intact, pain transformed but not erased. And this is the path not back to who we were, but forward into who we are becoming. Before we share in contemplative practice again, let me try to give you a 2-minute summary of what we've just talked about. Please feel free to share anything in the chat at all. You know, the path of true spiritual transformation begins not with self-mastery, but with surrender. Psychological healing is valuable, yet it's only a doorway into deeper union. Real freedom lies in releasing control, letting go of the self as the center, and learning to live from a place of radical dependence, a dependence on grace, on spirit, and on the wisdom of others. So resilience in this context is not a return to form, but a tender yielding to change. You might want to put that in your notes. It holds memory, it welcomes vulnerability, and allows the light of divine love to enter through our broken places. So what we are talking about in growth and resilience is that spiritual growth is less about perfection and more about presence. It is a gradual becoming, shaped by trust and mercy and the deep remembering that we are never alone. And this is one of the many things that contemplative practice does for us. When we sit naked, stripped naked in the darkness, and still recognize we are never alone. Friends, there is a silence inside the wound that aches with both sorrow and promise. And in that silence, a tender, luminous truth waits to be seen, not from a distance, but with a listening body. You see, trauma is not simply what happened to us. It is what got stuck. It is the heat that never cooled, the tremble that never settled. And healing is not a cerebral exercise. It is sweat and breath and flesh. It is the willingness to step barefoot into the fire of clean pain, that strange alchemy where we choose integrity over comfort, and where we say yes to the deep unknown. To walk into pain without a map is to move like an ancient pilgrim, uncertain but resolute. And when the wave crashes and we remain standing, tired, trembling, and more awake, we discover the sacred within the body. A loosened chest, a longer inhale, flow where there was once a wall, and we are not just released, we are remade. And Richard Rohr invites us to see this wound as holy, not as punishment, but passage. The irrational, the bitter, the enraged, all are often signals of something deeper, unhealed. And instead of dismissing or correcting, we are asked to hold, to stay, to love for a long time. Of course, not by ourselves, with a good guide. And imagine not fixing each other, but staying long enough for the soul to speak. What if the sacred wound is not our shame, but it becomes our shared doorway into compassion? And growth doesn't follow logic. It follows the rhythm of grief and surrender. Father Richard reminds us that every step forward requires a death, a letting go of the mask, of the false self, of the identity built for survival. But our identity is not for survival, it's for belonging. And this is not a self-help tactic. It is a radical invitation to union. Union with God, with each other, with the living earth. It's not fusion, but coherence. It's not erasure, but homecoming. And this is why we have a commitment to contemplative practice, because it becomes the crucible. It's not escape, it's encounter. And we sit not to rise above, but to sink into. We die to that shallow self so that the deeper self might live, and live radiant, grounded, and unafraid. In that space, love is not a concept. It is a breathing, and it is a breath moving in the body. It's stillness held in presence. And it's the gaze that says, you are seen, you are still becoming. Martin Luther King Jr. knew this sacred becoming well. He knew the ache of longing, and he did not retreat. He faced shattered dreams the way one faces fire, with honesty, courage, and a refusal to grow cold. This wasn't denial, nor was it defeat. It was transfiguration. His suffering became seed. His disappointment became offering. Friends, to stare directly at what broke and still choose hope is the most radical act of nonviolence. Not the bitter hope that clenches its jaw and pretends, but the luminous kind that transforms dungeons into altars. And Martin Luther King did not promise freedom in every lifetime, but he promised the freedom of walking the path with integrity, of refusing to cooperate with death-dealing systems and choosing instead to live in fierce alignment with love. Because, friends, the body that knows its own pain becomes the body that knows how to hold another's. Healing people heal people. And the soul that has faced its night can walk beside others through theirs. And in this way, the journey is never individual. Even in solitude, we are part of a greater field. We walk not only for ourselves, but for those who came before and those yet to be born. So, friends, let your longing lead you. Let your trembling body be your teacher. And sit with the ache long enough to hear its name. Trust the descent. Walk with others whose very presence steadies you. And cling to hope, not the kind that waits passively, but the kind that builds, sings, and keeps walking even when the road disappears. You do not need to arrive, you only need to begin. Our reflections this evening have been about healing and spiritual growth and how they are embodied experiences, not intellectual concepts. And friends, to mature in spirit, we have to learn how to face pain honestly, how to surrender our false identities, and how to live in communion with others who share the journey. And let's not forget that the wisdom of our ancestors, mystics, and prophets teach that transformation arises through suffering that is neither denied nor avoided, but embraced with integrity and presence. It is my belief over my few decades and deeper studies that one of the major problems of our culture right now stems from our inability to face pain honestly, to deal with suffering. We tend to take our pain and put it under the rug or hide it under the basket or put it in the closet, whatever metaphor you want. And it is spiritual practice that grounds this transformation by anchoring us in love and opening us to union with the divine and all beings. I don't think there is a single practice. We continue to practice to develop a deeper attuning of the heart. And the practice that we used for the last 2 years or 5 years may not be the practice that we use anymore. I think that it is a deep important practice to have a spiritual director as well as a psychotherapist. You don't have to have a DSM-5 diagnosis to need a psychotherapist. Because, friends, the path is both humble and radical. It is a daily turning toward the sacred, even in despair, and it is a daily refusal to lose hope. So let us enter into that practice that grounds this transformation by anchoring us in love and opening us to union. May we be open to the Divine's presence and action in our lives. Friends, we do have a few minutes for any additional comments or questions or reflections while you are thinking and typing. I'm going to take just a couple of more minutes to try to tie tonight's reflections to our yearly theme of radical resilience, which is, I think, simpler tonight since the title of tonight is Resilience and Growth. But these reflections deepen the meaning of radical resilience by challenging the cultural obsession with self-mastery. I don't know if you're like me, but I read probably hundreds of self-improvement books. And instead of self-mastery is surrendering, humility, sacred interdependence. And what we've talked about is that resilience is not bouncing back or returning to who we were. It's the being shaped by sorrow and marked by pain and softened by presence. To be vulnerable. The word vulnero in the Latin means wounded, and able is the suffix. So the ability to be wounded, right? So to be vulnerable is to have an ability to be wounded but not diminished. And friends, contemplation becomes the foundation for this resilience because it draws us beyond the surface of inner work and into the mystery of grace. You see, healing is not a linear ascent. It's actually a spiral of descent, return, and release. And the self is not fixed, but gradually opened. It's where you're made more porous and available to love. And it's where we are reminded that wounds aren't problems to be solved. They are the thresholds to transformation. Because grace is not found in avoidance. It's found in the honest engagement. The engagement with silence, with memory, with grief and mystery. And this resilience doesn't seek comfort, it seeks coherence. It doesn't seek detachment, it seeks connection. Not denial, but deep trust in the body's knowing and the soul's unfolding. We have lived in the westernized world for so long that we think all knowing is about what we can think. But we can learn that our body is a great way of knowing. Our emotions are great teachers if we can attune our hearts to that. And friends, as I said earlier this evening, even our jagged parts become altars of mercy. And true resilience is actually found in community. I believe that 12-step spirituality has so much to teach us because this is what that practice really does excel in. Resilience is found in community, in bearing each other's burdens with tenderness. Because we move forward not through strength alone, but by being held, shaped, and remade. And this is not self-help. It is sacred participation in becoming more fully human together. This brings to mind a few of my favorite quotes from James Baldwin. He tells us that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And he also tells us, you think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read, it was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive and who had ever been alive. And he also writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, They will be forced to deal with the pain. I think this is tremendous insight into what we are seeing happening, especially in our country today. Yeah. Bo, thanks for echoing that definition of vulnerable. If you want to learn more about vulnerability, then read Brene Brown. It's an excellent starting point. Yeah, I can put those quotes in the chat. Let's see. And Libby, I'm right there with you. Learning not to take offense. Still learning, yeah. You know, it is, Richard Rohr teaches that it's only the false self that can be offended. So those little offenses are doorways into recognizing your false self and using those to learn and grow, places for resilience. Richard Rohr goes so far as to say he prays for one humiliation a day because it keeps him grounded and humble and connected to other people. Well, friends, thank you. Again, look for those posts during the week at 11:15, and you can watch the recording either on the Mighty Network or on YouTube. Until then, may you walk not toward perfection, but into deeper belonging, where the wounds you carry become the doorway through which grace flows freely. And may your soul grow quiet enough to hear the ancient wisdom echoing through your body, guiding you beyond self-protection and into communion. And may you have the courage to let go of what no longer holds true, so that your life becomes a living prayer for all who seek the way home. Have a wonderful evening. I hope to see you again soon. Good night.